in this dog class. Cool. All right. And what's the first thing we need anytime we make a class?
Initialization.
Right. So we need something called definitionalize. Right. Just so I don't like waste your time too much. Who feels comfortable with definitionalize or wants an explanation? You're right. You know what? I done goofed. Who feels comfortable with definitionalize and does not want an explanation? Those should go hand in hand.
Can I ask you more a question about it then?
Yeah.
Is it more that definitionalize is privatizing it, or so that it's not public data?
That's
Yes or
mod
no?
two.
Mod 2, okay.
Yes and yes, but correct. It is encapsulating the data. It makes it private.
Okay.
Very good. So
It's like a constructor in Java.
if you know Java or JavaScript, you can think of initialize as a almost one-for-one equivalent. Yeah. So here we are at definitionalize, and I will explain it for those that like didn't raise their hand. What this is this will take some arguments, right? So anytime I try to do something like, oh, Fido equals to dog.new, right? This is how I create an instance of this class dog. In the same way that I did string.new is creating an instance of the string class, or array.new is creating an instance of the array class. If I just do .new, what .new will do is it will do a lot of magic under the hood, as pointed out earlier, but it will run the initialize method within the class. So if I'm running dog.new and it's going to run this initialize method, right, then I must need some sort of attributes, like maybe this dog has a name, and now I need to give this dog this attribute of @name. You guys did like the reading on this? Am I going too fast? Yes, no? Yeah.
Actually, I think I understand, but I would like you to explain it again because
Sure.
I don't get why are you doing name
Mm-hmm.
equal to name.
Absolutely. So what I want to do, right, in the same way that I created a bunch of those hashes with like dog and then the key of name pointing to like something ridiculous, if I want to make a bunch of dogs, I can just do dog.new like a million times right here, and it'll create a brand new dog object from this dog class blueprint. Instead of manually doing dog 5, 54, it's trash, it's doo-doo. This, you guys like that? If you guys want to do emojis, you hit Command Control Spacebar and like the emoji, they would come out. It's very silly, right? Cool. You guys want to add another cool dog name? I don't know. I feel like Reginald is a very fancy dog name. Reginald? Reginald can also be like a driver, right? Reginald, pull the car around. Cool. I don't know. Spartacus? Wow, that's intense. So I can keep doing this if I wanted to, but really what I want to do is eventually create this blueprint so I can just keep doing dog.new and then just essentially pass in a name like Princess Fluffy. What would you say? Acorn. Very good, yeah. So here's what's actually happening, right? If I were to do something like this, let's take a look at what it looks like in the IRB. Ooh. Cool. If I do dog.new and I pass in Fluffy, it's so fluffy. This is what I get. This dog object, right, with like a certain ID, usually like some sort of place in memory, and then this attribute of @name. And so I can put all these attributes on this object inside this definitionalize. Is that like clearing things up a little bit?
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Good question. All right, so what I want to do, right, is I have this definitionalize, right, and starts with a name. What other attributes of dog is there? Let's give it one more. Breed? Sure, breed, right? And so naturally I must do what? Some sort of like attribute of breed is pulling from the argument that I'm passing in, which is the breed. If I wanted to, I can just put like, this is argument number 2, if that helps you visualize it, right? Like whatever this breed is going to be the second argument. So it's just a little bit easier to see, but for our purposes, I'll just put breed.
So would they have to be in order then when you were calling the method, like you were passing arguments?
Yeah. So the question is, does the order matter when I do this, right? So earlier I had like argument 2 over here. So I had name and then argument 2, and then I had at name is going to name, at breed is going to argument 2. If I did fluffy acorn and then I passed in a breed, like, I don't know, I'm gonna go with breeds. Labrador, is that correct? 10 points to Gryffindor. So the question is like, does this order matter? If I put something like Labrador first, and then I put Princess Fluffy Acorn, what do you think will happen inside this initialize method? Huh?
Wouldn't the name be Labrador and Princess Fluffy Acorn be the breed?
Correct, right? The name would wind up being Labrador, and then the breed would be Princess Fluffy Acorn, which is not what we want, right? Which is an excellent lob, right? Which means that the order matters here. Cool?
So if like one of the attributes was supposed to be an integer and you pass in a string because you like mess up the order already, what would that like return? Or would there be like an error then?
If it's looking for an integer, but you pass in a string,
Yeah, because if you like mess up the order.
so for example, right here, breed, right? The attribute breed is looking for a variable that I'm passing in as a second argument. If I put in 4, which we all know is a very popular breed, what do you think will wind up happening?
It'll make breed equal to 4, because it's going to change it dynamically. That's no effect.
Right. So to the point earlier when I said that it's a very dynamic programming language, it's a dynamic programming language, not like very. There's no degrees of this. But yeah, it would just say breed is equal to 4. So there are ways to do like type checking and validations, which we'll get into much later. But the idea is that it's just going to put in whatever you put in. Well, it's prone to operator error. But good question. Did that answer it actually?
Yeah.
Cool. So lab. I'm a dirtbag and I'm lazy, right? So cool. So the idea here is, what if I wanted to test all of this, right? There's a lot of code written and I should be testing. Where would I want to test to see if this dog was properly instantiated and then I want to check its attributes? Where would I want to put the binding? Should I put the binding pry here, 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 here? After 13? Why? Say again? After at breed. Interesting. Okay, fair. So whenever I want to, and this is like a weird quirk of mine, this is like a personal thing, this isn't like necessarily like standard across like production, but you see how if I wanted to write something right after line 7, I usually say like, oh, put it on 7.5, which is a weird thing. I say like, hey, put it on 7.5, so I know to make a new line and put it in here. Not everybody does this, so if you start saying that and people don't know what it is, they're not crazy, it's me. But that's just something I do, to just be a little bit more explicit. Cool? So for me, let's do this. If I were to put the binding here, would I have even access to dog? All right, well, let's check. Ready? I have this file called money.rb, and in order to run it, bloop, I have a file called money.rb, so I need to run Ruby, money.rb. And I will hit this binding right here early on. So let's see what the dog class is. Bloop. Uninitialized constant dog. And it's because the binding pry will pause your code at the point of execution. So Ruby will read top to bottom, left to right. And so it'll read 1, like, cool, I'm requiring pry. And then I immediately pause. I've never even hit this dog class, so it makes sense that dog doesn't even exist. So if I were to move it, though, bloop, 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 here, let's try that. I'm going to exit out of here.
How do you do that?
Oh, sure. If you want this, if you are on that line, if you highlight Command and Control, you hold both, and you press up or down. So you go bloop, 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 bloop. It's like a game. Like I'm like shooting lasers and stuff. It makes coding way more fun visually. Right? Is that cool? Work?
I don't have enough code here to try it, but I'll test that later.
I'm sure it'll work. All right, cool. So if I have the binding here on line 13, right? Will I have access to Fido? Who says yes? Who says no? Smart. Cool. I was like scared that there were no hands gonna go up. I was like, oh man. All right. Yeah, absolutely, right? Because it hasn't read Fido yet, so I won't have access to it. And so where you drop the binding is very important in terms of like the process of you debugging your code. So let's.
If you're like within a method,
This
does
is shaker.
where you put pi matter within that? Since you're in a method?
Absolutely. I like make up a lot of words. I'm sorry. What I mean to say is yes. If you're inside a method, and we will get to that, I will put the pry in different places, and we will see. Cool. So let's actually wind up doing that. What a great non-plant, right? Let's actually test some code here, right? I'm going to actually go to pry, move it down. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it again. And now I have access to Fido, right? Because the binding pry is after line 14. So if I check out Fido, I see that is an instance of dog. Are there any questions on Fido being an instance of dog or how that happened? Yes. I will need the .new. So .new is a method that is built in anything that has like this class. .new comes out of the box with it automatically. If I do class, I can do, I don't know, person. There will be an automatic .new. It will do some Ruby magic under the hood, and then it will invoke this initialize method. I'm sorry, I can't hear you say again. I'm sure it's a good question.
I'm just confused because we have initialize within the class,
Mhm.
and Ruby's supposed to initialize it, so would that be like initializing?
Got it. So if I understand your question correctly, like here I'm defining this initialize, and all of a sudden I'm calling .new, and you're thinking I'm doing it twice, right? So the idea here is I'm simply defining the method. I'm saying when you make a new one, when you initialize a new instance of dog, right? These are the attributes that I want you to have, name and breed. So I'm simply naming it. I haven't actually invoked it. I haven't actually called that method yet. By calling .new, this is one of those really rare extreme edge cases where I call .new and it will invoke a method that is not the exact same name. So .new will correlate to initialize. Yeah? Good question, sure. So, all right, cool. So I'm back here, right? I have Fido. Can I check Fido's breed? How would I do that?
Just call the, do we define that method?
All right. So what I'm looking to do is somehow access this like breed, right? Bloop, bloop, bloop. Is that better? Bloop, bloop. More better? Too much? The Hulk? All right, cool. So I'm calling this method .breed to see if I have access to .breed. Unfortunately, we don't have access to it, right? There's nothing in here. What does .breed look like? Right. There's an undefined method .breed. So we can fix this easily. I'm like, cool. You know what? Let me go ahead and define a method called breed. Actually, let me do this. Let me show you this pro tip. Bloop. And just put end dog class in comments. That way, because you're going to get a lot of def ends, and then you do like if ends in there, and then it gets real dicey where the class ends. So I just put a little thing in here. So what should the method breed actually return? What am I looking for? It should return this this breed attribute. So I'm just going to go boop, breed. So if I actually exit out, restart this file so I can like reload all the code. If I check out fido.breed, I get lab, which makes sense because if I check out Fido, the breed is lab. But what if I wanted to check out the name? Fido.name. What would happen? Right, undefined method. Psh, let's fix that real quick. Bloop, bloop. You like that? Bloop, 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 bloop. Cool. If you like highlight over a bunch of stuff, you hit Command Shift D, it'll do like what is like a very quick copy paste. Okay. If you highlight over a word and there's an exact match, if you hit Command D, it'll highlight the next one. Command D, it'll start highlighting all of them. And then you can just go bloop, and it'll change all of them at once. Magic. Do you believe in magic? All right, cool. So now I have access to this like name, right? So if I do Fido.name, it actually works. But what if I want to rename Fido, right? Fido, unfortunately, has had a really hard time. Parents are no longer available. Like I went to a shelter, has to go get adopted. And then the new family is like Princess Fluffy Acorn. Let's change that. And now I wanted to change the name. I wanted to do Fido.name, and I wanted to reassign it and go Fido.name is now something else, right? Some cool name. What would happen?
That's not gonna work.
Why?
You have to make like a name equals.
That's right, because literally what the error says, like there's no method name equals. I can't actually do name equals because there's no method there. Makes total sense. So let's rewrite that, right? Fido.name, it's literally, if I take away all the spaces, it's just kind of doing this. Fido.name, and I'm putting in this like cool name as an argument. So let's make this method, right? Bloop, bloop, bloop. Def name equals to, and what do we actually want this name to be equal to? Like new name, right? So that means that the @name is going to now be the new name we pass inside that method. So far, so good. So let's try it. Let's test. Boop, 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 boop. I'm at Fido again. Check the name. And so what do we want to give this new dog's name? Jet? Phantom? Jet Phantom? Thanos. All right, Swag Lord it is. And look, it works totally fine because I built that method. Cool? Any questions on like what just happened, right? Like building this and then this and what it's doing? Sure.
So like logically, would it make sense to have a breed method because the breed's always going to be the same, right? That's not gonna change.
While what you're saying is true, right? The breed will never change. That is correct. Like that'd be weird and mysterious. But I don't have access to breed without this method. I cannot access the breed attribute. So this is just what is known as like the reader. And you can call them getters if you want. Because it's just getting this data from that instance.
Yeah, because this might be unfair for me to say that because just like repeat for me, like sometimes like in the later labs, like you kind of have to like mentally work through it. You kind of have to know what's the setter, what's the getter, without them telling you. So that's what I was asking.
I think what you're talking about is who likes writing all these methods, right? It's kind of lame-yoki. So you can do the attribute, right? There is a reader. Why did I not highlight? I have to write breed? Oh. Some more. I thought it was highlighted immediately, like a chump. Great. And so what this add-a reader actually is exactly this, like one for one. So I'm gonna just put this in the comment here. This is add-a reader, helping your boy out. Boom. So what?
So it's a pre-built class then, basically? Or
Yes.
pre-built method?
This is what is known as syntactical sugar. And that is, if I write something shorthand, it will actually do something for me under the hood. Cool? And so if this is just the reader, if I have the writer here, then I think I can do, wow, you like that? If you put R and tab, it'll put add a reader. And I'm curious, I think it's W tab. It's the add a writer. Nice. For name. And that will build this one. But if I have both, what can I use?
Accessor.
All right. Seen that before? So I can use accessor. And what accessor will do is build both of these. So adder accessor. Boop, 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 boop. We'll build both of these. Cool. If I just want this one right here, the setter, I would just put adder writer. Like attribute writer. Any questions on this? Should be pretty straightforward. All right, cool. Let's do something a little bit more practical. Well, this is just the idea that you can create classes at will, and then you can instantiate them, and they will have attributes that whatever you want. So let's do this. Let's build a bank account class. The first thing I want to do is I want to require pry, because I make a lot of mistakes and I want to test, like a G. So if I want to make a bank account class, how would I do that? Class bank account, smart, like this, or like that. Nah, man, y'all are cool. Little end action, little comment, end bank account. Cool, 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 cool. So what's like the first method I should be building in here? Smart. So initialize is like really interesting in the way that it must be spelled properly for it to be connected to .new. So very often, like, students would be like, oh my god, my initialize not working. I'm like, that's because you have no initialize method. Like, it's right there. I'm like, is it though? Is it? But yeah, so just be careful of this typo, that's all. So, yeah?
I was going to suggest like the macro to do with def.
Say again?
Def the macro that just,
Oh yeah, def I?
yeah. Oh, Risha said defi.
Defi?
DEFI, it'll remove all that.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you want, right, DEFI, and then you hit tab, boop. Wow. Powerful. And then you could take the argument, command D that Bat Johnson, and then you can immediately start getting after it. Code. So what attributes do we want for this bank account? The name of the person? Man, you are very respectful. The first thing I'm thinking is that amount. You know what I'm saying? But we can go with name, sure. Owner. All right. What is the next attribute? Mount. Y'all like that? Smart. It's called subliminal messaging. Not really. Okay. And so I'm just going to put add amount equals to amount. Anything else in here? Huh. Look at you. International. We could do currency if you guys want. I was thinking more like type, like checking, savings. It takes 3 days to transfer money from my checking to my savings. Okay. I'm old. That was like a really bad Kevin Hart joke. All right, so it's fine. So we'll just leave these two attributes, not a big deal. And what we could do is now we can start building what are known as instance methods. So can we access owner and can we access amount right now when we initialize a new bank account? No, you can't. So what do we actually need? Should I put adder accessor for both?
Yes.
Yeah?
For now, yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
I mean, the owners probably. Yeah, oh, that's very true. I mean, the amount is one that could probably potentially fluctuate, and owner is the same. So that can be added and not the others.
Sure, right? So let's put this, adder accessor for the amount, and then adder reader for the owner. Because like very likely, your bank account won't really change ownership. That's crazy. You just shut it down, open up shop. Oh, no. All right. That's how Wangtron rolls. It's fine. All right, so we have adder accessor for the amount, and we have adder reader for the owner. Cool. So let's actually make a brand new bank account. How would I do that? If I want to make a brand new bank, it's very racist of me. Bank account.new, right? And so what is the owner's name? Who wants to own this bank account?
Who doesn't?
Cool. Do you have like a cool name, or you just want to use like a regular name?
Bill Gates.
Warren Buffett.
Swag Lord. All right. Oh, Swag Lord, I got you good, man. I got you good. No, I'm just kidding. Let's start Swag Lord with crisp hundo dollars, right? No big deal. And so we'll put, that bank account's dripping in swag goo. If I want to test all this because I bought some code, where would I want to put that binding? The end of what? Smart. Right, I just want to like drop it right here. So let's do this. Ready? I'm gonna run Ruby, and this file name is called bank account. Wow, I am out of control. Great. So let's take a look at what swaggy is. Swaggy. Whoop. Let's see the swaggy, the amount. All right, and we have an adder accessor on the amount, so let's test that, right? So the reader's fine. The amount, let's make the amount 101 Dalmatians, and it's good to go. It totally ran. We can even check out the owner, swaggy. This is the swag lord. Who? This just blows my mind. Like my phone just says Evans's iPhone. It's actually kind of cool. Man, really thinking outside the box here. So let's actually like build some methods, right? What I want to talk about first is, what if I open this brand new bank account? How much money should be in this bank account when it first opens if I do not deposit any money? $0 hairs, right? How can I set some of these default variables? Yeah, absolutely. I can do it in the argument for initialize. So the idea here is that whatever at amount, it's going to be whatever I pass in as the AMT, the amount. I can set amount to equal to 0 if I wanted to. And that way, if I wanted to, make a brand new bank account, right? Bank2, Banksy. It's the artist. I think his name's Banksy. Okay, I hit caps lock. Cool. And then if I do not pass in a second argument, what will actually happen? Right, because amount is automatically set to 0. That means that something is in the second argument, even if I'm not passing it in as a second argument. Cool? Yeah, Ja.
That applies for nil as well, right? If you were set amount equal to nil,
It'll just be nil. It'll actually be nil.
But nil's not the same as 0.
Nil is not the same as 0, correct. So nil and 0 are completely different things. Nil means there is no value there. 0 means there is
Value of 0.
no amount there. The number of things there is 0, which is very weird.
You can't add to nil, which is a problem. So we put the initial amount to nil when we try and make it positive.
But weird things can.
Very good. Yeah, nil is a completely different data type. It's its own class. Nil class, correct.
Q nil.
Cute nil?
Q nil. That's what it is in the source somewhere.
Q nil?
It's like one object that's nil and it refers to that.
Yeah. It's like a nil class. Very good. So, cool. All right, so we talked a little bit about like default attributes. Let's actually make a method, right? So what can you do with this bank account? Right, you could deposit and you could withdraw, right? That makes sense. So let's make those methods, right? And that is deposit. Whoop. Deposit should probably take an argument, right? And that is like the deposit amount. Whoop. Embarrassing. And so how can we affect the amount if I'm calling the deposit amount?
Add amount plus equals amount.
Right, add amount, right, plus equals to the deposit amount. That makes sense. So in theory, right, if I were to just get out of here and restart this, and I were to go Banksy, I'm gonna say Banksy, your amount, you have $0 hairs, right? However, Banksy just sold a powerful piece of art and now wants to run deposit. How much does Banksy want to deposit? $200. Wow, that's a cheap one. Okay, wasn't expecting that, but I'll roll with it. So let's actually check Banksy's amount. Wow, it's $200 hairs. Cool. So this deposit is totally running. Let's just do withdrawal. Does anyone want to help me out here? Withdrawal, like
Withdrawal amount as the argument.
withdrawal.
Yeah, no, who knows how to spell it?
Is that right?
I think it's just withdrawal.
That's right. Sorry, I
I don't know.
That is correct,
it is
yeah. That's
smart. So I have the amount, right? And what happens to the amount? Minus. Let's put withdrawal amount. Cool. Notice here it's the snake casing, and I'm not using like the two capital letters next to each other. Cool. So the amount minus equals to withdrawal amount. That makes sense. So far, so good, right? Let's test. Boop, 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 boop. Cool. So let's do Swaglord. Let's check out Swaglord's amount. Oh. I'm sorry. It's Swaggy. Swaggy. Check out the amount. $100, right? And Swaggy is about to buy some very legal things and needs to take out cash at 2 in the morning. And how much does this person want to withdraw? $1. What ATM can you go to? I've seen 5s and 10s, but 1, that's interesting. Sure, let's just say 1. Cool. What should happen to the amount? It's 99, right? What happens if I want to withdraw $1,000 from this account? Yes, right. You should get overdrafted, right? Which is terrible because the bank's like, hey, you don't have enough money, so I'm going to charge you money for the money that you don't have. I don't necessarily have an opinion on banks. So what we need to add is some sort of like logic or condition in here, right? And that is if your current amount is less than the withdrawal amount, we could do some sort of really grimy logic, right? And say something like, hey, now for whatever reason, I'm also going to minus $15 like an overdraft fee. Or I can be nice and I can say puts, sorry, you broke, right? Insufficient funds, whatever proper message you want to put in there, right? And so here, remember, you're just writing Ruby. You're just adding the logic to this method. So let's test. Let's go Swaggy, and let's see if Swaggy can withdraw $100,000. You broke, and nothing happened. Cool? Any questions on kind of like adding additional logic or like basically creating these instance methods?
So we're doing at amount referencing an instance of that class.
We're putting at amount referencing the instance itself. So for example, if I were to do Swaggy, right? And I were to check Swaggy's amount, it's 100. But if I check Banksy, which is a different instance of the bank account class, and I ask for the amount, it's 0. If I do something to the Swaggy amount, will that affect the Banksy amount? Like, I'm going to tell my friends to listen to this lecture later, and they're going to think I'm crazy. Just like the names we've used. But yeah, if I do something to Swaggy's instance, will it mess with Banksy's instance? No. I'm sorry, that probably didn't answer your question. What was the question again?
Those are two different instances of the same class.
They are two different instances of the class. The class is a template, right? And so think of it as like a factory. I can make as many of these widgets as I want. So if I like throw one of these widgets into the fountain, I still have a bunch of them, and it doesn't really matter, but the class is still like this factory. Is that a decent analogy?
Yeah.
Okay, powerful. So right here, these are all inside the class. So these are known as instance methods, and this one @ sign is known as a instance variable. Oh, wow. I love when you guys finish my sentence. It's powerful. I didn't mean that sarcastic at all. It's like, it's great. Cool. So the idea here is on every instance of bank account, I have access to deposit and I have access to withdraw. Yeah?
I have a question.
Sure.
Say we wanted to add another
Sure.
And you wanted to make it the adult reader, would you make it? Yeah, sure. You want to do like change that type?
And you want to do what now?
Like you want to do it again. Like what I have to add, do like add a reader.
Oh, you want to add another one? Bloop.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just comma. You can add more. Cool. Good question. Yeah.
Do we prefer, like, when we're referencing a class variable, is it preferable to use the at sign or to use like this and the reader you created, or are you gonna get that?
I'm sorry. The question was what?
Okay, so you created a reader, right?
Yeah.
So and a writer. So instead of using at amount, you could use that reader to get the amount with like this.
Correct. If I wanted to, I can do amount as a method. Because remember, amount is a method,
Right.
which looks like this. Def amount equals to.
Right. Which is preferable? Like, is there a...
For readability, right now, I prefer just the instance variables. Yeah.
So question for the initialize class.
Yeah.
Since clearly it has to have the same number of arguments like you do in any function, I'm guessing it also then has to have this, it can't overload on the function, on that initialize.
What do you mean by overload?
Like I can't feed into it more arguments than what's in the initialize.
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't.
Yeah. So new will invoke initialize, right? So for example, right now it's taking 3.
Right. So you have to at least pass the 3.
Yeah, if I pass it 4, it'll say given 4 expecting 3. Very good. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about the fact that earlier we were talking about each individual bank account, right? I can instantiate a new instance of a bank account by doing bankaccount.new. Now, what if I am a bank and I want to look at all of the bank accounts? That was not painful at all. All of the bank accounts within my banking company, right? It's like Wang Tron's First World #1 bank. Cool? You laughing at that? Oh. It's like all these like Asian restaurants have numbers in them and they have to be #1, so I just figured I'd just follow the trend. You know what I'm talking about? You ever had like pho food?
Yes.
Like pho 99, ranch 99. Like, okay, all right. Also, I've never seen a commercial for a Chinese food restaurant, yet they're everywhere. Those things don't need advertising. They're delicious. So, I want to see all of them, right? Is it the responsibility of each individual instance of the bank account to keep track of all of the bank accounts? Like if I do bankaccount.new, right, for Chet, should Chet know about, powerful, should Chet know about all of the bank accounts that exist in my bank? No, that'd be crazy. So there's a different thing that we have to talk about. And that is going to be this like class variable. And so right now we have bank account. And so what I want to do is I want to do something like at all, which refers to like this class variable. Notice the difference between class and instance. Cool? Can anyone tell me the difference? Right, yes, there's just 2, right? So right now, if I want to keep track of all of them, what sort of data structure should I be using? Should I be using a string? Yeah, let's use an array, right? Let's use an array. It's just easier. Cool. And so if I know that initialize will be invoked every single time I call new, that means that every single time I make a brand new one, I need to make sure that the all array is tracking it and it keeps access of it. So how can I make sure that whenever initialize is invoked or executing, that all of them somehow have access to this brand new instance that I just made? What would I do? Right. I can do, right, ghetto, janky, old school stock and run push, or I can use push. But what am I pushing in here? What is it that I'm pushing when I make a brand new account? Right, itself. I'm making a brand new account, right? So Brand is going in to Wangtron's #1 first best bank. And it's like, I want to open a checking account. I'm like, yo, got you, fam. And then I go and I make a brand new bank account. That bank account now needs to push itself into this all array. So luckily for us, Ruby has something called self. And let's talk a little bit about self here. Let's figure out what this is doing exactly, right? And let's take a look. Inside the bank account class, right, we know that this is what type of method, right? This deposit. Instance method, class method, some other kind of method. What would it be? Why is it called an instance method? It is an instance method because you can call this method on instances of bank account. Cool? It's an instance method because you're calling it on instances of bank account. So far, so good. Eats for cheats. All right, bet. So what I want to do actually is, earlier we were like, great, how do I actually test these methods? I can drop a binding pry right inside this deposit. Let's take a look at this class bank account here and see where the binding is. It's inside the deposit method, the deposit instance method. So if I were to run bankaccount.new, will it hit this binding? Will this binding be executing? Who says yes? When I do bankaccount.new, the binding pry will pause the code. Who says no? Who thinks I'm trying to trick you? Still not yet. It's day 2. Don't worry. Don't worry. The sneakiness will come. Cheeky. All right? Let's see what happens. If I were to get out of here and I run Ruby bank account, what is this here? This pry is actually this one right here. Right? I've paused the code right here. How do I actually hit this binding? I need to actually invoke deposit, right? So once deposit is running, then this binding will happen. So let's actually do it on swaggy. I just think it's so funny. Oh, swagoo. Deposit. And let's deposit 1 million. Actually, that's a lot more than that, but it's fine. And now I'm in the next binding. Cool? I'm in the next binding. So I could check a lot of things in here, right? So for example, I passed in what is probably like $1 billion, right? I don't know. I'm not going to count the zeros. They're hard to count. It's like you like lose, you know what I mean? So what is deposit amount? Well, let's check. Bloop. Cool. What is at amount? So I have access to everything that's in here right now. Are there any questions on that? Like, yeah.
So, kind of going back to my question before, does it matter where you put the binding.pry in the instance method?
Yes, it does, and I'll like dive into that here in a second. Cool. So I have add amount and I have deposit amount. Why don't I check what is self here? What do you think self would be if I were to run self? What would it be? What should self be? Who thinks it's swaggy? Who thinks it's Banksy? Who thinks it's the bank account class? Who has absolutely no idea? Okay, who just doesn't want to raise their hand? Okay, very good, nice. It is actually the swaggy bank account instance. And let me explain why. What I did was I made a brand new bank account. All right? So I have swaggy is an instance of the bank account class. What I'm doing here is I'm doing swaggy.deposit, right? That's what you saw me run. This is the code that I ran. So inside deposit, deposit is being invoked on what? What is left of this dot operator? Swaggy. So that means if I'm running dot deposit on swaggy, self is swaggy. In the same way that if I wanted to run Banksy.deposit, what would self be in this example on line 39? Banksy. Cool. Are there any questions on kind of like how self is operating right here inside of an instance method? So instance methods are being called on instances. So far, so good. Now,
Sorry, just one.
Yeah.
So the self is automatically like kind of included in the object when it's being created.
self is a keyword that you can basically, is a special keyword that you can invoke in Ruby, and where it is written and defined will determine what it refers to. So what I mean by that is where it is written and defined. If I put self here, I've written it inside of this instance variable, so it will refer to whatever instance calls the method deposit.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say though is, I mean, I guess basically. I'll wait till later.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'll wait.
It's just a special word.
Oh yeah, no, I know that. Because my question is like in Python, you have to declare what the self is.
Oh yeah, Ruby do
That's
that.
why I'm
Yeah.
saying, so in Ruby it's just automatically
Yeah.
saying that once you create the instance, once you create the object of Banksy, swag, whatever it is, it automatically is assigning the dot self to it. So
Yes.
Later on, you can go and find it.
Under the hood, it will be doing that.
Under the
Yeah.
hood, it's all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But self is like a sort of globally available variable that is defined where you write it.
So by default, it's usually for the instance, like the new instance that's created, unless it's defined somewhere else.
Well, yes, where you write it is very important, right?
Use another example of where you could write it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do that. Where you want to write it is very important. Before I kind of get into that, let's do this. Let me get rid of this. Bloop. And I want to actually answer this question before I get into it. So here, I can have x minus 4 and then some code like this, right? Whatever, some nonsense code. Cool? Let's just say I'm like having a great day and I wrote some really clean code like this. And you're like, wow, so good. What will happen on line 20? Will it hit the binding? Why? Yes, because on line 19 it'll be like, hey, I cannot subtract. X is not even defined, first of all. That's like one problem. And then you want a minus 4. I don't know what that means. And then you've got all this gibberish here, and it breaks. If, however, I put the binding here, what will happen? It will pause right here because it hasn't gotten to this great piece of code that I've written. So where I write the binding is very important. So typically, I'd like to put the binding like at where I think the error is and then right before it. That way I can pause it right before I hit the error and I can kind of test to see what's happening. That make sense?
But you can still like reference things under the binding.
No. I cannot reference anything under the binding in the way that I can't reference whatever this code is on line 19. However, remember that this whole thing is red. Oops, this whole thing is red. I made these and then I ran deposit. So it hit this binding, right? Well, actually technically hit this deposit, and then it goes into the instance and then pauses right here. So it doesn't actually do anything with these two lines yet. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's get rid of that trash. Cool.
Okay, so the binding that you put all the way at the bottom, what line is it?
The binding that I put all the way at the bottom?
Yeah.
39?
So once it reaches 39, it's going to, because you had swaggy.deposit, it's
Okay.
going to go to the deposit method.
Yeah, it's going to run deposit first. Yeah. Okay.
It's not going to run the I thought you had to combine the deposit.
I did, and I just deleted it because I want to move on to your next point.
Sure.
So where I write self is very important, right? So here, def deposit, right? This is an instance variable, right? We talked about this being a class variable. So inside an instance variable, self refers to what? Inside of an instance variable, self refers to what? the instance that invoked it, right? Inside the class, what do you think self would be inside the class?
Class itself.
The class itself.
The double at, no? Yeah, the double at, oh.
Not necessarily. So the idea here is that bank account, right? Self inside the class bank account, not wrapped inside any of these instance methods or anything like that. Self will refer to the class. Cool?
And then when it's inside of a, let's say, initialize, what would it be referring to?
Well, initialize is being invoked by new, right?
Oh, that means it's for the instance, the
It-
new instance we created.
This would be the instance that's being created right now because it's inside. This one's dicey in terms of if it's like a class or if it's like an instance.
Yeah, I'll be honest, first time around this completely distorted, so that's why I'm like kind of.
Cool. Let's do this. Ready? Let's do def all. All right here. Inside this all, what is self?
The method.
It should be the instance that calls all, right? So if I do something like swaggy.all, it's going to do whatever this is, right? If, however, I did something like self.all, what is self referred to inside here? The self here is going to be referring to the class of bank account. Sure.
Why would you do that?
I'll tell you. Right now, I have a class variable called add@all, right? How can I reference it? Is there a adder reader? Is there a getter, a setter for this class variable? Not right now. But guess what we need? Bloop, bloop. So self.all will refer to the class, and it's going to return the class variable. So I can do self.all accounts, and it's going to give me this add@all, the array.
Can you not access the class variable all without, like, with the macros or?
Yeah, there's no such thing as like these like syntactical sugar for class variables.
Okay, great.
Cool. So why would this be useful? And how would I invoke this method?
It would be useful because it restricts all the other instances from needing access to it. And then you would want to invoke it by doing like bank account, the private bank account.
Well, let's take a look. Ready? So self refers to the bank account, right? That means that, in theory, let's just check out this pry real quick. Bloop, 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 bloop. I'm at the pry. Let's do this. Let's get rid of all this extra white space here. Cool. Is that all right? Is it decent enough? Cool. So the idea here is that I have a instance method called deposit, which I must call on a instance. If I have a class method here, what can I call the class method on? Which means that, in theory, I should do something like bank account, the class, and I should see something called .all accounts, which is the class method. And it gives me, would you look at that, an array of the two instances I just made. So let me walk through real quick exactly what's happening here for those that followed along but just need that solidification. So remember, self will be determined where you write it. So self inside, right, if I put self here inside of an instance variable, refer to the instance that called it. If I put self outside, anywhere here, outside of the instance variables, outside the instance methods, self will refer to the class. Because what is this anyway inside the class? It's everything about the bank account class, right? So naturally, just dropping a rando self in here Self can only be referring to what? The class, right? Self is referring to the class here. So if I defined a brand new method starting with self, which is the bank account, another way I could write it is simply bank account dot all accounts. This is the same thing because remember self refers to the bank account here, or I could do self dot all bank accounts. Either way will work. Did that clarify anything at all? Cool. And now I actually want access to this. Remember how we had to write the getters and setters for each one of these instance variables? So each one of these instance variables are tied to these getters and setters. Right now, do we have a getter for this class variable? Well, we had to make one for it. Cool. So by making this, right, what I'm doing is saying, give me the array, give me this class variable, which is an array. And every single time I run initialize, I'm going to set the owner, I'm going to set the amount, I'm going to set the type, and then I'm going to push that brand new instance into that all array. So if I make a brand new bank account, how many things are going to be in this at all array? If I make one more right now. 3, right? Because right now I have 2. If I make one more, there'll be 3. So let's do that, right? If I do bank account dot new, and I pass in, what is it? Owner, so me, and I have no money, and this is a savings account. Very sad. Okay, sorry.
Hey, I
You're
have
right.
1 cent in my savings account.
Probably have other, don't even answer
It
that
has like
question.
0% APR.
All right. So, great. I just made this brand new account. And when I ran .new, remember what it does. It runs this initialize. So I set the @owner to be me. I set the amount to be bagels. And then I set the type to savings. And then I pushed the brand new instance into @all. So if I were to take a look at the bank account, .all, I should see, just kidding, all accounts, I should see Swaglord, Banksy, and now me. Are there any questions as to how there are 3 items in the array now? Who feels good about like class variables? Who feels like a little bit better about self? You don't have to be a master, just like, like, okay, self is all right.
Just one other question.
Sure.
If I can. Now that you create the one of me, can you do now all the me dot functions on that? Like me dot deposit, me dot withdraw on that and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if I did bank account dot all accounts, this is just an array. So what is the 3rd item in this array? How do I have access to it? Bloop, bloop. Oh my God, embarrassing. This is the instance, yeah?
I'm sorry, like I'm saying, can you do like the me, so down at the bottom you did like the swaggy, and you did like the swaggy dot deposit into it. Deposit like $100. Now that you've added a 3rd account in the bank account class, can you do me dot like deposit like $100 into it?
Yes and no. So to answer your question, I cannot do me.deposit because me doesn't exist as a variable because I never defined what it is,
Okay.
right? However, this instance has access to all the instance methods,
Okay.
right? So like yes and no. That makes sense?
Gotcha. Now I got what you're saying.
Cool. So like this being the instance itself, I can even check its class, which is going to be an instance of the bank account, and I can deposit more money. Let's just go 9s. Let's go hard in the paint.
So yeah, you would deposit it through the bank account.
Right. So now if I take a look at all the accounts, this guy is balling out of control.
So side note, apparently you can use the underscore separator. Just look it up, like to separate like the really long strings of numbers.
Okay.
It's neat. It's useful.
That is very powerful, yeah. Cool. So, all right, so quick review, right? So the README, I just want to see if I've hit all of these, right? Who feels comfortable about what an object is? Right? Remember, just quick definition again, it's just an instance of the class.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So, for the last thing you called in Friday, bank account all
Yes, so remember bank account dot all accounts returns an array. If I ask for the second index, right, is actually going to give me the instance. The instance itself has access to all the instance methods. So that's why I was able to run dot deposit, right? Because what this whole thing will return is an instance itself, which was the me instance. Yeah, very good. Sweet. All right, so cool. So we're cool about sending messages. Anytime you do this dot, really what you're doing is like dot send, and then you're sending one of those methods down to interact with that object. You don't have to get too deep into the weeds, but that's what's happening so you understand. Cool? All right. Who feels good about creating a class, instantiating an instance of a class? All right. Cool. What's the difference between a class method and an instance method in your mind? Anyone have an idea? Like how would you invoke it, really? Sure.
You have to use the class, so in this case, bank account, to invoke the class method, and for instance methods, you have to use an instance, so like swaggy to invoke one of the instance methods, like deposit.
Right. So when I defined a class method, it has to be called on the class itself. When I defined instance methods, they can only be called on instances of the class. Does that clarify some things? Sure. Yeah.
So the only thing here in bank account RB, the only thing that can be called on bank account is all accounts.
Correct. If I wanted to make another class,
You have to do
I do delf. Yeah. Self. I can even go bank account itself, right? Make a new method on it, like yo. And then all this is gonna do is puts you broke. And so I would just do bank account.yo and like you broke. That's all it would do. Cool. All right. Oh, let's get rid of all that. Bloop, bloop. All right. So you can create new instance methods, right? And we talked a little bit about self. All right. We even talked about the syntactical sugar that is the adder reader, the adder writer, and the adder accessor, and what it builds for us, which is the getters and setters, which is like def breed and def breed equals. Are there any questions on object-oriented programming, creating your own classes, instantiating those classes? Should feel so powerful right now. Cool. That's all I have for you today. Thank you.